Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen, and across from me is Andy Littleton, who's making fun of me. He's the pastor of Mission Church. We've actually spent the weekend together, really, doing stuff. And so we talk a little bit about that. We talk a little bit about my issues. Hey, I do want to preface all of this with, I need to remind people when I'm on Faith Over Breakfast, I am being Eric. Yeah. And I am not a representative of the village, though I do understand that when I say things, I do represent the village, but you have to give me a lot more latitude.
What I think what you mean by that is like, I don't represent everybody's thinking at the village. Yeah. This is. Yeah.
And I'm talking off the cuff and just expressing my heart, and you get to kind of see the turmoils of the inner workings of Eric and Andy.
Scary.
Yeah.
So
scary.
Are you really ready for this? Are you sure you want to listen to this episode? Now you do.
Yeah.
Now you do. And brace yourself for the two topics, saying God bless you and ordination.
We love you guys.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Tick, 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 tick. Tick, tick. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's actually nice. How about you?
I don't know. How's it sound? Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Looks pretty similar.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good.
Wow. Just turned a couple knobs and look at that.
And magic.
Yeah, good job.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know about you, but this morning I was just thinking, I think I really need a haircut now. That's sort of where my head, I was driving over here and I was like, should I or should I not get a haircut today? So that's how spiritual my mind has been.
Wow.
I know.
Well, it's been a long weekend for both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were many good things, but it was a long weekend.
Yeah.
We had classes, which is the gathering of local churches that we are affiliated with.
And El Paso.
And I suppose it would be New Mexico.
Yep.
But we're just kind of hopping over it at the moment. So New Mexico Reformed Christians get on the bus, But I guess.
I was like, maybe they all belong to different classes than ours.
Maybe they do. Maybe I don't understand. They might be part of Rocky Mountain.
They might be part of Rocky Mountain.
Anyway.
We are talking so much jargon.
Yeah, and nobody cares.
Just
nobody cares. The point is, we were in a lot of meetings this weekend, and big news for our churches. John Simon at Mission Church, Mark Crawford at the Village received ordinations in the Christian Reformed Church, and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Corey at the Village. God bless him.
God bless him.
Yep. And so you'll get that joke in a minute. So which one do we do first? Should we talk about Corey's question?
Yeah.
Okay. Corey's.
So you give the question.
Okay, I'm not looking at it right now.
All right.
But Corey is asking about saying "God bless you" to people. I mean,
right.
Was it in the context of sneezing? Was it in the context of just saying it to people, like, "Oh, God bless you," little kid? We could pull it up and look. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
You were.
I was looking at my phone, and the reason I was is I wanted to see if there are CRC churches in New Mexico, and there are CRC churches.
Well, so we're just not. We need to talk to them.
Yeah. Hey, come on now, guys. Come on, be part of Arizona classes.
That's right. Yeah,
we're the best and the brightest.
Amazing.
Incredible,
really.
All right, so we're going to talk about Corey and his question about how people say God bless you when you sneeze, or...
Was it when you sneeze? I'm looking it up.
We're going to look it up right now. Well, while you do that, I'm going to take care of some business.
Oh.
So, Rick Drost, I apologize. I do intend to email you, and we will work around your schedule to get you in to the podcast studio. But we have been super busy, and we haven't even been podcasting. And then Shannon, yes, we do have your book. But it does require some, what do you call it when you have to pay to get it to another country?
Money.
It requires money. Yes. And then there's also, I don't know, taxes. And some extra forms I got to fill out. So I haven't managed to get to the post office to do that. But we will get it in the mail. We promise you'll get it before Christmas.
And Jacob Lewis, if you're listening, I know you wanted to receive a book, and you also mentioned that, but you don't live out of town, but you are moving out of town.
Yes.
So now's your chance. You can submit your question and get your free book.
So let me review that, because I think we've got about a week or so left on this. But if you are someone who does not go to Mission Church or the Village Church, we would love to hear from you. Just saying, hey, I listen.
That's right. Where you're from.
And where you're from, and give us your address, and we'll send you Andy's book, Little Man.
Yep.
And it'll be signed.
And if you have a question for us, we would love to discuss it.
We'll talk about it on air. And by the way, anybody else listening, so you can be a villager, you can be a mission person, you can be anyone. We would love your questions. We like answering questions. We come at them a little differently than the other guys. I listen to John Piper and N.T. Wright. They both have question answering things, and they answer things very differently as they think about how to help people, and so do we. So we would love to offer you our interesting way of coming at problems, and maybe that'll be helpful to you.
So here is Corey's question.
Here's Corey's question.
Yo, guys. Is that how Corey talks? He goes to your church, so I mean, we're going to have to trust you. That's his voice.
I'm not really good at Corey's voice.
Imagine that voice for the rest of this question.
Okay.
I'm curious if you guys could talk about the idea of saying things like God bless or God bless you after a sneeze, or just whenever. There's our answer to that. Sometimes people say that to me, and I'm not really sure how to respond. I really like Spanish, vaya con Dios, igualmente, which means go with God, same to you. Sometimes when someone says God bless, it feels passive or just funny. Perhaps it's because I didn't grow up with the language. Thoughts?
Well, I can certainly see how it'd be weird if you didn't grow up with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I grew up with it, so it's kind of just constant. Part of my culture, so I don't really know how to not think about it outside of that.
Yeah. This has been addressed by others. This has been in circles that are far more qualified to discuss such things as these.
Right. I don't know the history of saying God bless. I used to know it, but I don't. It was one of the table discussions at my house. And so the internets came out a while ago, and we figured it out, but I've already forgotten.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like there was some...
like the spirits would come out of you when you sneeze, something like that.
There was something like that, sure.
Yeah. But I think the blessing of God is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I would like it more often. I mean, I would like to be blessed whenever, I don't know, I touch my head. Like if somebody could just bless me every time, that'd be nice.
So here's my thought on it. When I sneeze, there is there's a moment in it where you feel out of control, right? Because sneezing, you keep sneezing, and there's something in a genuine way. If someone says "God bless you," like it's saying God's in control. Like there's this, you're all right. So that's kind of how I understand it.
Okay. Wow.
That you're saying, wow, like this is this moment of a bit of out of control, but God bless you.
I tend to feel about the exact opposite. I tend to feel like when people say it, it's become just a totally meaningless phrase.
Sure, it's become meaningless, but it can be executed in a way that is meaningful.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say it, I mean it.
Yeah.
I don't just say it nonchalantly.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
And I don't always say God bless you. I just sometimes just say bless you.
Yeah.
Like,
do you hold your hand out toward them at the time?
Well, no. But I have said to people who are sneezing a lot, bless you, and are you okay?
Oh, okay. Are you okay? I like that.
Like, you need a Kleenex.
Yeah. So the person I was thinking of who's addressed this is Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, well, one of the greatest
cultural commentators, if you will.
Yes, commentators.
Yeah. And so there's an episode of Seinfeld about this, and I don't remember all the details, but they have this very discussion, the show about nothing. Like, why do people say that? Like, what is the deal? What's the deal with God bless you? And then somewhere in there, Jerry gets around to saying, I'd rather hear that I'm really good looking. Like, so when I sneeze, if somebody could say, you are so good looking, he's like, I would rather hear that. And
okay, all
yeah.
right.
And then
I don't know.
I feel like that somehow gets somebody in trouble with some lady or something. You know,
Right. It all
unravels in the end, right? As it always does in Seinfeld. So, you know when Seinfeld's brought it up that it's a conversation many people have had.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So I've dabbled with some things. I've thought, what's my actual reaction to a sneeze? Like, do I feel like these people need a blessing from the Lord?
What?
I don't personally like that. That's, I mean, what you're saying, if they, like they feel out of control, that's good.
Yeah.
I could adopt that.
Yeah.
But I tend to think they just sneezed and it like got all over their leg and they're just kind of embarrassed right now. And so I'll tend to say something that's just like, whoa, that was crazy. You're
trying to start a new culture, aren't you? Just trying to make it all.
Or would you like a napkin? Like, could I share my napkin with you? That I think is helpful.
Could be.
Or just if they look really surprised, just to go, oh, yeah. I don't know. I've actually played with these things.
Yeah. I don't really think about it.
No.
Yeah. I got too many things in my mind.
Yeah. So you just bless you.
I'll say it, and when somebody sneezes at the mall, I'll be like, bless you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then they'll say thank you.
Yeah.
And it's a humanizing thing because I think people are like, oh yeah, we're humans, and I recognize that there's more to us than just me buying something from you or me shopping here. And it's like, yeah, you're a human being.
Yeah.
You sneeze, you need a blessing.
I think when it comes down to, I'm being a little silly, but here's my thing with. So okay, I actually in the language classification, like when you take something that is holy and you just kind of treat it commonly, that's profanity. That's what that word is.
Right.
And I tend to feel, at least from my own heart, that's profane. When if I were to
say God bless you,
if I did and I didn't truly like mean to confer a blessing from the Lord. So I prefer, if I'm going to speak of God or kind of confer a blessing or pray over somebody, to mean it.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so I try to distinguish between when I mean it and when I don't. And I don't always get that right because a lot of things are ingrained. But that's something I've tried to do. I feel the same. It's the same way I feel about saying like, what the hell?
Now I'm going to have to check the profanity on the...
Yeah, cool. No, it's the same way I feel about that because it diminishes the gravity of the concept. It profanes a thing that should be like bowed before.
Right.
Yeah. So there's my more serious answer. So that's, I realize very few people share this concern.
Well, obviously concerned Corey, and
it did.
And he's so here, I'll just put this on the air. We can always, we should have Corey in.
Sure.
He's always writing us,
Yeah.
Maybe have Colleen in. They're like our main, fans. We could we could get them both on the mic and we could have a fun time sometime. Or we could do them one at a time.
There you go. Yeah. All for it.
All right, cool. We got guests lined up. We just have to actually schedule them.
So it seems. That's the tough part.
Yeah, it is a tough part.
Which leads to that whole, if anybody's just bored out there and wants to schedule our lives for us and produce this podcast, just give us a call.
Yeah, give us a call.
We also can help you with your boredom.
Right, and maybe you'll get some salad to go, I heard.
Well,
let's not get
ahead of ourselves.
Come on, salad and go. We know you're listening to us.
Oh, constantly.
Constantly.
What if they were?
Oh, that'd be weird.
That would be weird. Okay.
We really want to know our audience. We're desperate people. We want to know you.
Yeah.
Email us.
There you go.
faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Yeah. There you go. Plug. Okay. We just had ordinations happen.
We did.
Now, we could get into the whole. First of all, why don't you just give your quick definition of what it means to ordain someone?
My quick definition of what it means to ordain someone. So, ordination is the recognition by a body of people. I understand ordination in two two ways. One, ordination is a recognition by a community that someone in their midst is an overseer or a shepherd or a pastor or an elder in their community, and they are singling them out, and through a series of questionings, making sure that they publicly demonstrate that, and then proclaiming that publicly, you are our pastor, our overseer, our shepherd. So that's the communal way. I think also ordination is from an outside body, can be a group of people who are pastors and elders and overseers, saying through an examination, through questions and checking on that person's capacity to expound on the word and shepherd and care for people and understand church history to some degree, that they are qualified to lead and care for people. And so that's being proclaimed publicly also. And so they're welcome into a fellowship of men and women who are in that place. That would be my definition of it.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. I think the only thing I would add, which I think you kind of said, but I would add that I think it's an affirmation of a call from God to lead God's people. Yeah. And so the idea is this person would feel called by God, sometimes before or sometimes through the process of a community affirming that call and actually walking them all the way through what that call requires. Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes many different forms within,
of course,
the Christian community.
Yep, and probably all of them have some elements that are very good, and some probably have some that are less necessary. But the idea is you're kind of submitting to the process and to one another.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that happened this weekend. Mark Crawford and John Simon.
So, okay, having defined that, and I'll tell you, I didn't used to personally care about getting an ordination. This is an interesting piece for me. I felt that was very true to the New Testament or something, to not be so concerned about the outside voice or who says what about me. And I actually look back on that and I think that was more just me being independent and not understanding the word, honestly. But I didn't put a lot of stock in it. I didn't really want to do it. We did an ordination within our plant, and that to me was a big enough deal. And that was that our original members, before we planted, I felt that they should actually affirm that I was a pastor to them. And so we did somewhat of a formal ordination at the founding of our church. And then I did come around to doing the ordination with the Christian Reformed Church. And I was surprised that at the end of it, I actually felt appreciative. I kind of thought I was just going to be checking a box. But at the end and being prayed over, I was surprised at the sense that I had that it was nice to be affirmed by the broader church to some degree. And I think John felt that way. It seemed like Mark, it meant something to him that the broader church was even pursuing this with him.
Right.
And so I think the things I wanted to talk about, less than the formalities of ordination, would just be, why do we like to be sent and affirmed? What's up with that? And I think, and why is that important? And then maybe something about just, not a lot of churches have actually, the more I talk to church leaders, not a lot of churches have raised up younger people and actually ordained, and with the hopes that they're going to stick around.
Right.
Yeah. So why do we do that? Why are we trying to do that?
Well, let me go back and talk about my experience of ordination, because I still don't think it's that important.
Yeah.
And I think that where I think it's important is in the community that you serve.
Sure.
They need to affirm who you are. And I think it meant a lot to me to be ordained in another group, not because I wanted it, but because I realized it was needed to have a voice outside of my own community. And so having other people affirm that, yes, you have a valid voice meant a lot to me.
Okay.
But I think, honestly, in the Reform world, we put too much emphasis behind ordination.
I could see that.
And I have a lot of reasons for that, but I mean, we don't need to really try to flesh that out in this podcast.
Sure. And I mean, I don't want to get too personal here necessarily, but I feel like knowing you, the connectivity to the broader church, it's not that you don't believe in it, but it's not as strong of a sense to you, I feel. Like there's a lot more about like my people, our church. It's just a strong emphasis of yours, of your ministry is. I don't know. Am I wrong? I mean, that's something that I've noticed.
Yeah. I think that, I think one thing is I have a hard time with a lot of the streams of Christianity, and they're...
Except for one. I don't know, the Village.
Well, no. I mean, I think well, in the sense that, I have more problems with the Village in its behaviors than I do.
Because you know a lot about them, right?
Right, but I think like this resistance to being willing to exist and to practice together, and so that's difficult for me. Like I would rather, if we're gonna all get together, that there be a much more oneness built around us, and that we're not divided so much by our theological structures.
So in frustration that there is not a lot of oneness or connectivity, you don't see the value in connecting?
I think that I see the value in maybe in some ways trying to build a community that's an example of that for other people. And that takes some time. And so my assumption is that 100 years from now, hopefully, or 50 years from now, the Village will have a more of an influence and be able to have modeled what that looks like. But right now we're in the
Yeah. And to do that, you'll have to model connecting to other churches, I suppose, right?
Yes, and I do. I meet with other pastors, and I am in that engagement. But I am also in the Reform world, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the Reform world, but I'm also theologically more Anglican, and I'm more Pentecostal in my structure and belief systems, and so.
So there's no perfect home.
No, there isn't, and it's really hard. I think it's hard for people to articulate. I believe that and let's just give some examples in the Reform world. I believe in infant baptism, and I don't believe in infant baptism. I don't. The T. Let's go. We went through the exam. Total depravity. I don't actually believe in total depravity. They also do believe in total depravity. I hold a lot of belief systems in an open hand and don't clamp down on them.
So people are members of the Village. Like if somebody, and I know you guys have a little different way of doing that, but if somebody came to you and said, "Hey, some of the beliefs of the Village I hold with an open hand," would you say,
"It's awesome"?
Yeah. So are you trying to say that your longing is that you can have these open-handed things and people say that's awesome? Or is that kind of what?
Well, here's, and I don't mean to get into this, but this is the best example. The big thing in the Reform world, there's a couple big things in the Reform world, but there are things that I believe should be closed hand in Orthodoxy, right? I'm not arguing outside of Orthodoxy.
I know you do. Yeah.
We're arguing inside of Orthodoxy and moderate to conservative Orthodoxy. That's where I'm standing. But in there's enough to get us upset at each other. So the whole movement about women, elders, and all that kind of stuff, there's a demand, we can't just hold this in an open hand, and complementarians can't go to egalitarian churches and serve and worship there, and vice versa. And
which oddly our denomination
allows that. Yes,
they do. Yeah, it's not that it's easy. It's not.
No, it's not.
But it's actually at least encouraged there, which is kind of rare.
Right. I just feel like I would prefer more cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And different language. But so that's And you're right. I'm a little bit more about the local church and less about the bigger church.
Yeah, and I didn't say that to be like or I didn't mean that to be a hurtful thing. It's just something I've noticed. Like you probably to the benefit of the village in many ways are very attuned to the local church. I think the village has been blessed by the fact that Rod is more attuned to the bigger church and has connected you all to it. I think. I mean, I'm sure that's caused tension too, but I think it's brought blessing for sure.
Yeah. No, I think the hard part is when we first planted the village, we did want that, and we were rejected by people, by the local church. So there's the broader church, like we weren't allowed to be part. We were weird. We were questioned. We were labeled, and so I didn't have a lot of place.
And how do you speak to, like, I don't know, when you think of, let's see, how do I want to put this? Do you end up inviting your community to like risk that hurt again, or inviting them to like just not?
Well, they actually love it. A lot of them love especially the Christian Reformed Church, and they get all excited when we have classes, and they show up, and they like the people, and I think they're more welcoming of that than and actually are kind of interconnected in lots of different communities within Tucson.
Yeah.
So it's not like our people don't participate in other spaces in the city when it comes to what's going on. It's more for me, I have in some ways stood as with a prophetic voice, which makes it harder.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have opinions and thoughts that are hard for people to handle.
Right.
I mean, I got in trouble for saying things like, people used to come to our church and say, oh, we love the preaching at Calvary Chapel and the worship, but there's no community. Right. My answer to that is the preaching at Calvary Chapel is terrible, and so is the worship, and that's why you don't have any community.
Right.
Because I believe those three things are intertwined. You don't just get good community, and then you can have good preaching and good worship, and they're just things separate from themselves. And I'm a little hyperbolic, so I say those things to get a little bit of a like, well, maybe you should think about what you're saying.
Sure.
Well, that gets back to pastors and gets back to leaders.
Did Furrow give you a call? Did he furrow his brow at you?
Furrow would not ever do that. You can't get a hold of Furrow.
You can't get a hold of him. That's true. He doesn't have time.
He doesn't have time.
Pipsqueaks.
Yeah. But I'm not that way anymore. I don't say those things. I try not to get myself in trouble. I try to be a nice person.
Yeah.
So anyway, ordination. I think for me, I think it's an act of submission for me.
Okay.
So
I should clarify. I've actually never tried to get a hold of Robert Furrow specifically, so I have no right to say that.
I haven't, but I know people who have.
There you go. So I rescind my comment.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
You don't know.
Yeah.
But he's a busy guy. He has like a big 2-campus church, and busy.
Yeah, you're busy. You're also a busy guy.
Yeah, we're all hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
We don't have as many gatekeepers, though. The bigger you get, the more gatekeepers you have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is.
I'd like to have a tiny church with lots of gatekeepers. I'd like to have 5 members and 20 people keeping anybody from talking to me.
Right.
That'd be great.
I've come here to do our 5-person Bible study.
and I don't have to talk to anybody.
Please call my schedulers to meet with me.
And then call my facilitator who will do the Bible study and just give me all the credit.
Oh, this has gone off the rail. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, ordination was beautiful. Mark got ordained. John Simon got ordained. I told my wife that these 2 examinations were probably the closest exam to mine.
Oh, okay.
In that I felt they actually asked, and I feel like, and even Mark said this, John got the harder set and the clearer set.
Yeah.
They asked more clear questions, I think, in the sense they kind of figured out
I think they learned from the first day.
Yeah, so Mark kind of had to take a little brunt of things.
Sure.
And
I thought that was in a way totally unfair that one guy got to watch the other.
Yeah.
Honestly. That was,
but, John had to answer some questions that Mark didn't. So he got the solas. So,
right.
So that was good.
Which is funny because I actually would have preferred some of those questions myself to some of the ones I got. I was like, why can't I just get the 5 solas?
Right.
Yeah. But for all of us, depending on our background, that stuff's more or less ingrained.
Yeah. I mean, it did inspire me to write out a structure and instructions for examiners next time as to what you might want to ask, how you might want to ask those questions, and what are we actually really looking for that you can help that person communicate.
Yeah.
Because I felt like some of the questions, particularly the way they were asked, like the questioner they weren't good questions that led the answer to kind of be able to expound what he needed to expound. And so I would like to write some, like, here's some example ways to ask this question, and we want to cover these sections. And
yeah. Yeah, we had a little bit of cultural barrier too.
There was
a
that
factor, which is a cool thing about our classes is that there's some cultural diversity there, but also like asking great questions across a language barrier is tough.
Oh yeah.
And things of that nature too.
Yeah.
So that's just one example.
Well, it's good training though.
Yeah.
I think I can help people do that a little bit better.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking about, our intent, and we'll see what happens, but our intent is that John really grows up in his faith and his leadership abilities, and just in his connection with the church over time, and just continues to take on responsibility.
Sure.
And that I've realized is rare. A lot of churches, speaking of denominational differences, and even within the CRC, the denomination we're connected to, the idea is a pastor gets trained professionally in a way.
Right.
And then when a church's pastor is retiring or quitting or being fired, they do a search and look for a candidate, kind of like a company looks for a manager.
Right.
And they try to bring somebody in, and it can work. But that person comes in completely cold, like they don't know anything about the community they're coming into usually, and they have to go through this whole transitionary period of getting to know the people, and hopefully it works. Sometimes they're better than the other guy was,
right,
or person was, or whatever. But there's always this. I talked to somebody who'd been through that several times. I didn't even know him that well, and they just talked about how every time the pastor changes, there's like this 2-3 year weird spell of where nobody knows kind of how to do things, and they have to relearn, and
right. And then if that pastor
church.
Leaves in 3 years, then you're
do it again.
Perpetual cycle, yeah.
And in some church worlds, that's actually built in.
Yes,
it's cycling.
Yes, yeah. Some Methodist and some Lutheran churches do this.
Yep. And then, I guess in one sense, maybe they don't get just to where they depend on a person.
Right.
And there's something to that. But then there's this sense of always losing continuity, and the vision of the church always shifting. And I think there's something tough about that too. So in both of our worlds, we've come to embrace the idea of kind of pastoring for the long haul and trying to raise up somebody from inside the community that knows it and loves it and leads. And we'll see if it works, right? Time will tell.
Well, and I think that if you train, so Christian community is all about honor in a sense, right? So we're all in the kingdom of God, and we share the honor of Christ.
Okay.
And so if I raise up Mark, that doesn't mean that I lose honor and he gains honor, right? It means that we're honored together.
Right.
If you can hold that, then Mark can be raised up, and Mark can work in his giftings and his structures. And if another young man comes along and has a different gift structure that maybe puts him more in the front a little bit and Mark in the back a little bit in the sense of the way they're leading, that's fine, because Mark's not losing honor and this man's gaining honor, or this woman, whatever, it's the honors together, and we're expressing the kingdom. And if we can hold that, then we're not like this person came first and they are heir to this.
Or they started it.
Right.
There was a sense, this is interesting, that just reminded me of, in a previous church context for me, there was a big thing on like the one who started it gets to decide how it goes. Like, because we owe it to them. Because they started it. And I actually, that made total sense to me. And I'm just now kind of going, I wonder, I think there's something to appreciating that someone put in all this work and formed a community. I don't think that shouldn't matter at all. But there is something to being able to say, yeah, I started it. That's what I was good at. That's what I was called to do.
Sure.
And then, but that doesn't need to diminish the person that is now carrying it forward in this, or adding to it or building upon it. Or it doesn't need to, it reminds me of the Paul Apollos question. And Paul kind of framing it as like, look, I planted, he waters, but really this is about God. Who's giving the growth, and so one of us is not greater than the other.
Right.
And I think that's interesting. I hadn't really thought
well, and I think it's good, and you and I are in church plants. Mine's a little older, but I started it with Rod.
Right.
So there's a DNA that you put into it. If you're going to stick around like I have for 20 years in that DNA, then obviously you're going to your fingerprints are all over everything.
Well, and then the ideal thing is these leaders who are coming up. So like Mark, he has that DNA embedded in him because you've discipled him. So it's not like you have to.
Right.
You've been teaching this before he ever was kind of raised up, if you will.
Right. And I think the beauty of it all is that if you can build a community that way where there are lots of people bringing their voices, as there's stability within the community, the voices start having much more, what do you call it? They have more cash. They have more strength within the community to shape its identity.
Or capital or whatever.
Capital, yeah. And so if you begin to take some of the capital that you have and give it to someone else and say, spend this capital, and then they begin to spend it, and then it becomes their capital, and then it's a beautiful thing because people are like, yeah, certainly Eric started it. Certainly Rod is essential to this. But we're going to keep going long before them or after them. Right. And they have ministries that are going to proceed into maturity and into different spaces. And we move along with them in that. And it's going to look different and it's going to shape. But it'll always have the DNA of the beginning. Because for us in particular, it's built around a value system.
Yeah.
And not a set of like mission statements.
Sure.
And so,
to pull back, it's interesting to pull back from I think I mentioned this illustration I gave at church about the idea of kind of handing down a family business. And this was in a little bit different context. But there's sometimes, so a family business gets handed down to the kid.
Right.
And I've seen this happen just in very practical ways where the kid is like, I've never liked this business.
Right.
I don't want to own this business.
Right.
Or like it's never been relevant and I just want to take it and put it down, or I'm going to take the bare structure of it and try to utilize that to launch something completely different. Okay, right. So that happens.
I've seen people sell it too. They just take it
and
sell it for 6 months and sell it.
Yep. Yeah. And so that, let that be the illustration of like church can, when you hand it to new leaders, that's how they can feel if they don't really believe in it.
Right.
But then you've seen the family business whose generations have gone by, and they are saying, we want to carry on the legacy of what dad started or great grandpa started because he started it on these foundations and we believe in these. These are what have made us great. And yeah, the difference there is that there's genuine love, respect, and really, there's dignity that's recognized back at the founding.
Right.
Of course it's changed, but there's this love for what was and what shaped, the people involved. And I think when that layer is there, you carry on the legacy. And I feel like that's sort of true in church too, that what you want to do is you want to find people who love what you're doing and are all about it and care about you when you're like a founding leader.
Right.
And they're not carrying it on because you're saying, you can't change this because I started it.
Sure.
They're carrying it on because they appreciate it.
Right.
They're thankful for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are really good pictures. And I think that's why the village, I think some of it for me, if we go all the way back to, Eric, you're focused more on the local church. You have a hard time with the larger church. Some of it for me is like to produce leaders within your community, it takes a lot of time. And so balancing the amount of time I spend with other people outside versus people inside, is hard because I'm like, okay, but I need to raise up leaders, and I need people to be on mission. And we live in this busy world where, I got to find space in people's lives to do that, and, areas to do that. I think.
I'm not, and again, I'm not criticizing that. I actually think it's needed. I was just maybe speculating that. I wonder if another leader of yours is more the liaison beyond. You know?
Certainly Rod is that way, and Mark has a definite appreciation for that kind of thing. Yeah. But like, I think the other thing I noticed with pastors too is that, and it's the beauty of the village, and I actually think it's there in mission too, is that communally, like, a lot of pastors are very lonely. They feel disconnected from their congregations. They don't feel like they have places of accountability. They feel burnt out.
Right.
And I would say I have a good set of leaders, a good set of elders, and a community that holds me accountable, steps in to try to be a friend, is willing to care for me, listen to my hard things, not be upset that they're the one causing problems and yet still trying to care, and still trying to care for me at the same time.
Right.
And I think that kind of communal thing with leaders internally that keep me accountable, I don't feel as much the need to have the camaraderie of other pastors.
Yeah.
And I think but I see that in other pastors, this loneliness of and they just feel lost in their places, and that's really hard.
It's interesting. I have relationships in our church, and I have some outside, but I think that I have at this juncture, and our church has changed a little, but I honestly have kind of come to feel like the group and the leaders we have now are more willing to kind of really walk with me. And I feel a closer kind of depth of relationship, actually, which is, that's a good thing, and maybe reflected on that. But I feel more of it recently, and increasingly so. And then we do have some friends in our community for sure, and people who I think are willing to give me feedback, even if it's a little bit, tough to hear, and I know that they love me. That they love me. So I also have some relationships with other pastors, and it's not necessarily for me coming for this place of I'm lonely. I'm social. I think that's just part of what I do. But I also have been in church systems where I've seen that was lacking, and I know that these other leaders need it. And I feel like it's part of my ministry to help facilitate it, basically.
Sure.
But you're right. A lot of the pastors that we know and deal with in other systems are all alone. And it's
right.
It's hard.
And I think that's the other part that's hard for me is when I go hang out with pastors, my gifting puts me in a place where I'm like
caretaking.
Oh, wow. I probably should have coffee with this guy and just sort of talk through some of that. Nobody's talking through that with him.
Yeah.
And I think, but I don't
And then you're like, I don't have capacity.
I don't have capacity to do that. Yeah. Unless I gave up what I was doing at the village. And maybe someday I'll do that.
There's a line too. There was a denominational Zoom call for me the other day where the general sense for everybody was we need to do more of these. And I was thinking, we do not need to do more of these. This is, I find it tough to do this monthly because I already have all these other spaces where I sit with other leaders. And so there's, I think we just all have to know the thresholds of, I'm in enough people's lives. I can't do any more than this. And oddly, there's a bunch of pastors and leaders who need more of that, which is surprising to me, but as much as they technically lead, they're not getting fed into.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Which is unfortunate.
Yes, it is. And I think for me, depending on what groups and things that I do, I will touch base with anywhere from 15 to 40 people in a week.
Yeah.
And most of those will be conversations that have some depth to them. And that's not typical for a pastor.
No.
Because in that I'm also half that time prepping a sermon,
right?
Running podcasts,
Sure.
editing video for a document. I'm cleaning the building. I'm helping people do this.
Because we do all these various things.
Yeah. I shift gears quite a bit as a small church pastor, and pick up the ends of where the volunteers don't.
Right. Right.
So, or just don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of volunteers, and volunteers just don't have. They work.
Yeah.
And they have kids, and they have life. So.
And you don't have kids, nor do you work.
Right. So I have time to do all that stuff. Right. Well, that's why I have to live I live a remarkably disciplined life.
Yeah. It is remarkable.
Out of necessity.
Yeah.
Not out of my own great and grand personality.
Yeah.
Because I'd be dead.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's true. It's an interesting. Anyway, I had a thought that could launch us into a whole nother conversation, but I'm going to not do it because I'm looking at the time.
I 2 weeks from now.
Maybe. We'll see if I remember.
Well, I'll put it on the air, and then we won't say anything about it. And then we can tease it.
The idea of I have struggled with the sense of kind of believing that I, as a leader, as a pastor, can do things that seem to be more for fun or frivolous. Like there's a side of me that feels like that is somehow like wasting my or God's or our people's time.
Right.
And anyway, that comes up because I took more trips this year during the summer than normal, and I've really felt weird about it. And I look around at other people in our church, and like they take way more trips than me. So I don't think anybody's judging me.
Right.
But there's something I just feel like, why is it that I don't think this is good, or like that getting away is good?
Wow.
What's up with that? So that's an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah. Coming up soon. Processing Andy.
Processing it. Yeah. I have done some of this in
other
places. So hasn't been untouched, but
yeah,
it's interesting. Okay. Hey, Eric.
I think we're done.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah.
And again, if you'd like, we have a couple more of my books. Happy to mail them to you. Eric will get it to you in 10 to 14 weeks. So don't worry, it'll be right there. And
sooner if you're not in Canada. Sorry, Shannon.
And and if you have any questions, email us faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. If you are from out of state, we'd love to hear where you're listening from, along with your question, and let us know if you'd like a book, and we'll get it to you. So thanks for tuning in.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.